Hi Year 6, welcome to Monday's maths lesson. This week we're moving on to looking at coordinates. Before we go into the main part of our lesson though, we have got our 6 arithmetic questions, which are brand new for this week, followed by our 2 stretch questions if you are choosing to do those. Pause the video now and have a go at those. Okay, hopefully you've gotten all right with those. Question 1 then, we've got 3 cubed. 3 with a little 3, that means 3 cubed, which means 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, and then to solve that, we need to do, first of all, we need to do 3 times 3, and then times that answer by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, times that by 3 gives us the answer 27. So remember that little 3 means cubed, which means we need to do 3 lots of it. Okay, question 2, we've got 1.5 times 24. So this is asking us what is 1 lot of 24 plus what is half of 24. So 1 lot of 24 is 24 plus half of 24. Well, half of 24 is 12. So 24 plus 12 gives us the answer 36. Question 3, again this week we're looking at BODMAS, and question 3 is a BODMAS question. So here we've got a multiplication and a subtraction. So out of those two things, the M comes first, so we're going to do the multiplication first and the subtraction second. So first of all we're going to do 5 times 3, which is 15, and then take away the 11, which gives the answer 4. Question 4, we've got a fraction times by a whole number. Remember, when we times a fraction by a whole number, the denominator stays the same, it's only the numerator that changes. And we remember that by thinking T for times, T for top number. So we times the numerator by the whole number, 3 times 4 is 12, and the denominator stays exactly the same. Question 5, 4.2 times 1,000. We've been doing timesing by 10, 100 and 1,000 quite a lot recently, so hopefully we're experts on it by now. We're timesing by 1,000, so we need to move the digits 3 places to the left because the numbers are getting bigger. So my 4 is at the moment is in the ones column. If it moves 1 place, it's in the tens column. 2 places, it's in the hundreds column. And 3 places, it ends up in the thousands column. So my 2 is in my hundreds column, and I need 2 placeholders, a placeholder in the tens column and a placeholder in the ones column, which gives me the answer 4,200. Question 6, we've got a fraction, add a fraction. I cannot add fractions together unless they have the same denominator. So my first step is to find the common denominator. So I need to find a number that is in both the 4 times table but also in the 5 times table. So the common denominator that I would go for here is 20. Okay. Then I need to ask myself, what do I times my 4 by to give me 20 on the bottom? I'm timesing it by 5. Whatever I've done to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to do 3 times 5 on the top, which gives me 15 twentieths. My next fraction then, it's in fifths, but I want to make the denominator 20. I times this one then by 4, don't I, to get that 20 on the bottom. Whatever I've done to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 3 times 4 on the top gives me 12. Now I can add them together. 15 twentieths, add 12 twentieths, gives me the answer, not 37 twentieths, is it? It's 27 twentieths. Gives me the answer, 27 twentieths. That's absolutely fine. You'd get the mark in the test if you wrote that, or you might have written 1 whole 1 and 7 twentieths. Either of those would get you the mark. Okay, stretch. Question 1, our long multiplication. The answer was 630,209. And question 2, the answer was 58. Okay, next thing for us to have a go at this morning then, Year 6, is our times tables. So set yourself a minute timer and see how many times you can get through the sheet on the screen. Okay, and we are now going into the main part of our lesson. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we are going to be looking at coordinates this week. So today, our I can identify and plot coordinates. So first of all, I want you to pause the video and think, what are coordinates? What rule must you remember in order to read coordinates? So pause the video and think about that question for me. Okay, hopefully you've had a bit of thinking time. Coordinates then show the position of something, and you often use them on a grid. You might use them if you've ever played the game Battleships, or if you're reading maps, for example, in real life, you might need to use coordinates. So they show you the position of something or the location of something. And then the rule for reading coordinates, I like to use the rule run before you can fly. So just going to change my screen view a little bit. Okay. I like to use the golden rule, run before you can fly, which means we go along the bottom, we run before we fly up. Okay, some people like to say in through the door and up the stairs. It's the same principle as long as you're going in through the door and up the stairs. Run before you can fly. So that means when we read coordinates, we always read the coordinate from the x-axis, which is the one along the bottom of the flat one. Before we read the coordinates from the y-axis, which is the axis that goes up or down. If you're ever struggling to remember that, it's not a very good X. If you're ever struggling to remember that, I like to remember it that X is nice and flat. It's a flat letter, whereas the letter Y, it's got this bit that goes down, and that's because it's the axis that goes down. Right then, I've got a couple of coordinates that are plotted on my little grid here. So first of all, the green coordinate, if I am reading that, remember I go run before I can fly, so I go along the bottom before looking at the coordinate up the side. So that green dot is in line with my number 3 along the bottom. So my first coordinate is 3. Okay, it's very important with coordinates that I put them in the right order. If I put them in the wrong order, the coordinates are entirely wrong. Okay, so my first coordinate is 3. So I'm reading along the scale along the bottom, and that green dot is in line with that. My second coordinate then, I've got to read along the scale along the side, and that green dot is in line with the number 1. So the coordinates of my green dot are 3, 1. When I write coordinates, you must write them with brackets, just like I've done, and a comma in between the two numbers. Okay, that is how we show that they are coordinates. I've showed you how to find the green dot. What I'd like you to do now, Year 6, is pause the video and find the coordinates of the yellow dot. Okay, the coordinates for the yellow dot then, remember, run before you can fly, so along the bottom, that yellow dot is in line with the number 1. So my first coordinate is 1, and I'm going to write that down straight away as soon as I've worked it out. My second coordinate, my y coordinate, is 3. So my yellow dot is at 1, 3. Okay, this kind of coordinate grid you will have seen when you are lower down the school. But in Year 6, we use a coordinate grid that looks a little bit more like this. And we call this a coordinate grid that has 4 quadrants. Think about quadrants as like squares. We have got 1, 2, 3, 4 different quadrants. But the rule is no different. Our golden rule is still run before you can fly. So we're going to try and work out the coordinates of the different letters on the screen now. So I'm going to take the letter A first of all, and I'm going to show you how to find the coordinates of letter A. So following my keys to success, I need to read along the x-axis, and I need to find the coordinate along that scale of where A matches. So I can see A is in line with -4. So I'm just going to write coordinate A. So that's the one I'm finding. A equals, right, my coordinate then is -4. I'm going to write that down before I do anything else. And now I want my coordinate up the side. It's in line with number 3, isn't it? Okay, so the coordinates for A are -4, 3. Okay, I'm also going to do B, and then I'm going to let you have a go at doing C, D, and E yourself. Right, B. First of all, I've got to go along the bottom, haven't I? Run before I can fly. So along the bottom, first of all, for B. And I can see B is in line with -4. So my first coordinate is -4. Write it down before you move on to the next coordinate. Right, B is also then going down the side, or up or down, going along the side, -4, and going down, B is in line with -3. So my coordinates for B are -4, -3. Okay, your turn now. Pause the video and find C, D, and E. Okay, then year 6, hopefully you've managed to find those. For C, our coordinates were -3, -4. For D, our coordinates were 3, 4. And for E, our coordinates were 4, -3. Okay, hopefully you got on all right with that. When you do your maths.co.uk today, not only will you be asked to identify the coordinates, just like we've been doing here, but you'll also be asked to plot some coordinates. So this time around, you have been given some coordinates and we just have to plot them on the graph. So the first coordinates we've been given are 0, 2. Now, when a coordinates are giving you 0, sometimes children get a little bit confused with that. But as long as we remember our golden rule, we should be okay. So 0, I've got my scale, and I've got to decide where 0 is going to go on this scale. Well, 0 must be here, mustn't it? It's not. If I go in here, then that's at 1. If I went here, that's at 1. So along this scale, imagine it's a bit like a ruler along the bottom or a number line. The 0 has to be here. Okay, so I've done my running part. Next I need to do my flying part, so I'm going up or down. Well, I need to go up to 2, so I'm on 0, 2. So that first coordinate must be there. 0 on my x-axis and 2 on my y-axis. Next coordinates then, I've got 1, 1. So first of all, I found 1 along the x-axis and then 1 along the y-axis, and I can plot it with a cross. I've done that one, I've done that one. Next coordinate is 1, 3. So I find 1 along the x-axis and I find 3 along the y-axis, and I plot it with a little cross. Okay. Next one then, I've got the coordinates 4, 2. So I've got to find 4 along the x-axis and 2 along the y-axis, and then I plot it with a cross. Okay, year 6. I have got a couple of these plotting coordinates that I would like you to have a go at. To be able to do this, you're going to need to draw yourself a coordinate grid in your book. So use a ruler for that, and you'll need to draw the lines really neatly and set it out really neatly. But have a go at doing these 2 different sets of coordinates in your book. You're going to need to draw 2 different sets of axes, 1 for each question. Okay, pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay then, year 6, hopefully you got on all right with those. Let's have a little look at what you should have drawn for each of those sets of coordinates. So the first one, we had -3, -1, which would go here, -2, -4, which would go here, -1, -1, which would go here, and -2, -2, which would go here. So have a look at your work and just check that you have got the crosses in a similar place to where mine are on the screen. Okay, I realise you might not be able to do it perfectly, especially if you're working in a lined exercise book. Okay, for the second lot of coordinates then we've got -1, -1, which would go here, -3, -2, which would go here, -2, -4, which would go here, 0, which is quite a tricky one, remember this is our 0 line, 0 -4, which would go here, and 1 -2, 1 -2, which would go here. So that is where we would expect our crosses to be for that. Okay. The final thing that you're going to encounter on maths.co.uk today is a kind of problem-solving question that looks a little bit like this. So my question says, on the grid are 3 vertices of a rectangle. Remember, vertices are like corners. Vertices of a rectangle. What would the coordinates be for the 4th vertex? Okay, so you can see they've plotted some corners of a rectangle for us, or some vertices of a rectangle. We've got to work out where the 4th vertice would go. Okay, hopefully you can see, if I join those together with a line, not a perfectly straight line, but to make the 4th corner of a rectangle, to make a rectangle, that's what it would look like. To make the 4th corner, or the 4th vertice would need to be here. So the question is asking me, what would the coordinates be for that 4th vertice? Well, run before I can fly is going to be 2, 1. Okay, so I have drawn the rectangle on to help me work that out, and on maths.co.uk you can draw on the screen using the pen if you need to help me work out those coordinates. Okay, final thing that I'm going to show you before I send you off to do your work on maths.co.uk then is what the stretch questions might look like if you choose to have a go at them today. The stretch questions today are on maths.co.uk, so it's a separate test on there if you do want to do these as well. So this time, still coordinates, but this time we haven't got the lines that show us where each coordinate goes. We have to use the information to work out the coordinates. So question 1, the diagram shows 2 identical squares. Point A is 10, 10. So they've given us the coordinates for point A. They're saying that point A is 10, 10. They've also told us that this point here is 0, 0. We've got to work out the coordinates of B and C using that information. The key here is that they've told us that these are squares. Okay, we know that squares have 4 equal length sides. That information should help us with working out the answers to these. Right, we're going to start off by having a think about B and the coordinates for that. So, first of all, I'm thinking about my x-axis. So, we're finding the coordinates for B. And along the x-axis, I know that the x-coordinate for B has to be 0. Okay, if this is point 0, 0 and point B is right above it, it's no further to the left or to the right along the x-axis than this point here. It has to be exactly the same, so it has to be 0. Next we want to think about our y-axis and how far up this y-axis point B is. Well, point A on the y-axis is at 10, so point B must also be at 10. Because point B is not any higher up the axis than point A. They are horizontally in line with each other, so they have to have the same coordinates. So it's point B must be 0, 10. Next I'm going to think about point C. I'm going to do exactly the same. First of all, I'm going to think about the x-axis, and then I'm going to think about the y-axis. So, point C, along the x-axis, so how far along this axis is it? Well, it's exactly the same far along the x-axis as point A was. And point A was 10 along the x-axis. So point C must be 10 along the x-axis. Now I'm going to think about how far up the y-axis it is. How high up does it go? Well, I know from here to here went up 10. Because this coordinate was 0, 0 and this coordinate was 0, 10. So from here to here must go up 10, which tells me that C must be 10 more than what the y coordinate was for A. So it must be 20. Okay, so this is quite tricky maths, this part. We're using the information they've given us to help us work out the missing coordinates. The second question I've got on my screen then, if you'd like to pause the video and have a think and see if you can work out the answer, what are the coordinates of point A and B in that picture? Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to have a think about that then. We'll start with thinking about point A, and we'll start with thinking about the x-axis. So how far along is point A along this x-axis? Well, this point here was 12 along the x-axis, and this point here was 12 along the x-axis. So A is exactly in line with them, so that must be 12 as well. Okay, the y-axis, this point here was at 3 along the y-axis, and this point here was at 9 along the y-axis. A is halfway in between them, so halfway between 3 and 9 is 6, so it must be 12, 6 as our coordinates. Next I'm thinking about B. First of all, I've got to decide how far along the x-axis B is. Well, I know this rectangle is identical to this rectangle, so to know the length of the side, I've got to look at the x-axis coordinates here. So this rectangle started at 5 and it went to 12. So the side must measure 7. The side here is going to measure 7 as well. So if it started at 12 and I'm adding 7, it's going to be 19. Okay, the y-axis, well, it's exactly this point B is in line with this point here. So that's still going to be 3, isn't it? It's no higher up or lower down the y-axis. So it must be 19, 3. Okay then, Year 6, if you found that last part quite hard, do not worry, that is quite tricky maths, and that is just set for the stretch today, so please don't panic about that. What I'd like you to do now is have a go at the work on maths.co.uk. I would like everyone to do the main activity, you might also choose to do the stretch. Once you've done that, I want you to come back to the video and watch the reasoning question, and also have a think about the plenary. Okay then, hopefully you've got on all right on maths.co.uk. Our reasoning question that we're going to look at today then says, Sally says, the following coordinates make a rectangle. Is she correct? Explain your reasoning. Okay, pause the video now and try to write your answer to that question. You might need to draw yourself out a coordinate grid to help you work out that answer. Okay, if I was answering this question then, first of all, what I would do is I would plot the coordinates that Sally has given us. So she's given us -2, 1. She said 3 minus 2. She said 2, 1. And 2, 3. Right. Well, those coordinates definitely don't make up a rectangle, but I think I can see that these ones look like they were going to make up a rectangle. So Sally said 3 minus 2, but actually what I think she meant was -2, 3. So if I was writing my reasoning answer out here, what I would write then, the question, I've got to go back to the question and answer what the question says. So the question says, is she correct? So first of all, I would write, no, she isn't correct. Sally's coordinates do not make a rectangle. Sally has mixed up her x coordinate with her y coordinate. For the second point. the second coordinate should be minus 2, 3. Remember, I always need my brackets for coordinates. Okay, and I'll just check that. The second coordinate should be minus 2, 3. Okay, so if you'd like to compare your answer to that reasoning question to my answer and see what you put. Okay, final thing then for today, Year 6, for our plenary then, I have one question that I would like you to consider. And that question is, can you remember the golden rule for coordinates? What is that golden rule? Okay, either shout it at the screen right now or write it down in your book. Okay, the golden rule then, run before you can fly. Or in through the door and up the stairs. However it helps you to remember it, but it's the fact that you have to read along the coordinate along the bottom before you read the coordinate up the side. Alright then, Year 6, I hope you got on alright with that. I'll be back in tomorrow's lesson where we are going to be looking at translation of different shapes. See you tomorrow.